Sunshine. I'm breaking in somebody else's false teeth for them. Sunshine. Sunshine's on Sunshine's on the righteous, boy. Are you sort of recording?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. What have we done? I started covering the puddle duck. We've got some solar text which we're using. I bought. I had a huge reel of what do they call it? Is it natural solar text? Can't remember. Antique. And I bought some orange because I thought I'd like two colours on the plane. So that's your natural, and that, when I can get hold of it, is the orange. As you can see, the orange is more or less opaque, whereas the antique is kind of translucent a bit.
Yeah, so I see the wood to that.
You can just see the wood, yeah, the pattern through it. It's actually quite nice to fly a plane which is covered in this just in the evening, just as the sun's going down, so that the sun shines through. You could just about see it through there if you've got a good bit of light behind it, but it's not quite as opaque as translucent as that one. So I think it's the colours. I've got some red somewhere and you can't hardly see anything through that. So we've done those two. We've not, obviously, we've covered up all the slots that we made for the hinges. We'll find those later on. You can just about make them out from there, and then we'll hinge that up. We've also done the tail, back end. So it's the movie bits really that I've done in orange. Pardon me. As you can see, I've just put a little piece of plywood strengthening just there and on there for the horn to screw onto. I've yet to properly shrink the covering, but that's fairly substantial. It's okay. This piece here, the tail plane, I've completely covered, although an area of this obviously will have to be cut out. One, to glue the tail fin in, and two, to glue it actually onto the fuselage. So I'll do that afterwards. I'll just cut it, mark it and cut it out. You want to make certain though, which I didn't, if you're using this sort of transparency type of covering, that you've got off all the marks. I've got a number 6 on there for some reason or other, don't know why.
Let's see if I can see that.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
If you want it to look nice, make sure you've sanded off all the numbers. That was something on a piece of wood, I think. I don't know why. 6 mil thick, yeah, perhaps. I don't know. Anyway, something I didn't put on. We've also started on the wing, which I should stand up and show you. Alright, the wing. We've done the underside of the wing, covered the underside of the wing in 3 sections. Centre section and 2 outsides. It's beginning to look quite nice. What I did was I laid down the centre section first, and then I overlapped the 2 side sections over this centre section. And in order for it to be able to glue properly, I used balsa lock, which is kind of like a glue, which activates with heat. So it's kind of like the stuff that you You won't see it on there, will you? No.
Mm.
So you just paint it on. You leave it for an hour or so to dry completely, and then when you put your second piece of covering over the first piece of covering, when you heat it with the iron, which is this is the iron that I use, or something or other iron, can't remember what it's called. Prolux. Yeah, Prolux iron. It's okay, it's not digital. See, I've got a thermometer which I stick on it just to test it. But you get to know what it should be, the temperature should be like. So anyway, when you activate that with the iron, it activates the glue both on the surface of the covering, and it also activates the glue that you've just put on. I've put a couple of pieces of strengthening, thin, very thin ply, there and there, and along this trailing edge, so that when we stick the old elastic bands on it, which will go cross, 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 and straight like that, we want to make certain that we don't deform the balsa. So let's just go to strengthen it up a bit. Right, let's have a quick word about the covering. This is the actual covering material. It has, it's a linen, no, it's not plastic, and it has a transparent backing on it. Don't forget to take that off before you try and glue. A number of times I've forgotten to take it off, yeah. Okay. Right, and we have a different method of actually attaching the covering to the wing, depending upon whether the surface is solid, as in the leading edge, the D-box section, or whether it's an open structure, like the fins. Sorry, not the fins, the
Ribs.
The ribs, yeah. So, generally speaking, if the whole thing was a complete open structure, you'd put the covering on the wing like that, obviously a bigger piece, cover the whole thing. You'd tack front and opposite, and then front and opposite, and then put smaller tacks all the way along, tacks down the side, and then go over it with the iron for it to actually glue. Now the problem is, with the balsa covering like that, what you don't want to do is to trap any air underneath it. Doesn't matter so much here because you've got obviously an air gap, but here there's no air gap. It's just a flat surface onto which you're attaching the covering. So the idea when you start, what I generally do is I tend to get the iron. This iron isn't on at the moment, but I'll tack it in a number of places along that leading edge. I will then move the iron across this surface so it sticks to the balsa all the way along. Okay. Then, with a little bit of tension, tack this end, but only after you've attached and glued with the iron this area here. What you don't want to do is to tack all the way along here. You don't want to glue it all the way around and then try and glue it by covering it with you following it with the iron. Otherwise you'll just end up with a big air bubble underneath it. It has to be moved out
So the air bubble, you'll see the air bubbles when the thing starts to shrink and glue. It'll start wrinkling and air bubbles will appear, and they'll be pushed to the outside as you go. So that's the difference between covering an open and a closed section. These here obviously can just be tacked down, and then the whole thing, turn the temperature up, and then go over it with the iron to shrink it, or with a hairdryer, should you wish. Anyway, that's about the covering. I don't think that looks too bad actually. The orange and antique looks like a bit like orange and yellow, really. They go nicely together. And then the next bit, we'll pop back upstairs, because you probably notice we're in a different bit of the house at the moment, because it gives me a little bit more space to do the covering. Next bit will be just going through the hardware that we're going to use for this particular monster. Alright, well, we'll see you upstairs in a tick. Okay. Did you notice that, how easily I lied to you? We're not actually going to see you upstairs, because this video is as long as it should be. Don't want people nodding off. So we'll finish it there. Next time we'll go through all the hardware, which we've already actually recorded. We did that a couple of minutes ago. But it's, that's my missus downstairs shouting at me. What?
Do they need to know that?
Of course they need to know that. My video? Wait a minute. Right. So, bye. See you next week. No, see you next time.